My name is Natalia Carter. I'm 29 years old, living in Denver, and I work as an accountant for a construction firm. That year, I came home for dinner with my family, carrying a small suitcase, some homemade cookies, and a naive sense of excitement I still clung to whenever we gathered. But when my sister raised her wine glass and smiled, saying, "This Christmas, the whole family's going to Aspen, except for Natalia," I realized I hadn't just been left off the trip. I'd been erased from what they called family. Have you ever been pushed out of your own life by the very people who were supposed to protect your place in it? If you've ever felt like a shadow in a house where your name is still on the deed, leave a comment below. Like and subscribe to this channel so we can uncover the truth they tried to bury. Because what happened after that moment changed me forever. I still remember the holidays when I was little. While everyone circled around Claire like she was the only star in our family's sky, I was often encouraged to spend time at Grandpa Leo's house, so the main house wouldn't feel so crowded. No one ever asked if I wanted to go. And strangely enough, I always looked forward to it. His house was about a 10-minute drive from ours, a small oak cabin with a wide front porch and an old rocking chair where he liked to read the paper. Whenever I walked in, the house always smelled of warm wood and vanilla cookies. Grandpa would greet me with his gentle eyes and a simple question, "What do you want to do first today, fix the car or bake?" Unlike my parents or Claire, who always looked at me like I was a faint shadow of my sister, Grandpa never compared me to anyone. He talked to me like I was whole, like I mattered. With him, I learned how to change spark plugs, mix almond cookie dough, even sew on buttons, all during those quiet afternoons we spent together. Once I asked him, "Grandpa, how come everyone always praises Claire but never me?" He stayed quiet for a moment, then smiled softly, the corners of his eyes wrinkling beneath his faded ball cap. "Because Claire likes the spotlight, and you, my dear, you're the warm light behind the scenes. You don't need noise to shine, Natalia. People just need to see you once, truly see you, and they'll never forget you." I carried those words with me through childhood like a thin red string, keeping me from drifting too far in a family where I never truly belonged. I remember the year I received a statewide scholarship for a math research paper. I came home beaming, only for my mother to glance up and sigh, "That's nice. But Claire just got nominated for the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. They're putting her in the paper." Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Claire just smiled, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Keep trying, maybe next year you'll go national." I smiled and nodded like I accepted it. That night, I rode my bike to Grandpa's house. He was wiping down a fishing rod when he saw me. He set it aside and started boiling water for hot cocoa. "Need to talk?" he asked gently, like he had already seen the storm inside me before I even stepped through the door. I just shook my head, dropped to the floor, hugging my knees. He didn't push. We sat there watching an old video he'd recorded of me when I was 7. My first time helping him fix the car. In the clip, I was laughing, my hands covered in grease, and he clapped proudly, saying, "That's my little mechanic." I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the sound of my own laughter echo back at me from the screen, knowing that at least someone had truly seen me. Then came my 16th birthday. Claire had just thrown a lavish hotel party. Live band, a 3-tier cake. Our parents even hired a videographer. I got a small store-bought cake from Mom, hastily placed on the kitchen counter. She forgot the candles. Dad left early for a client meeting. Claire texted, "Busy with a restaurant board meeting. Happy birthday. Don't eat too much cake, you're looking a bit puffy lately." I didn't blame them. I didn't say a word. I just sat on the porch and watched the snow fall quietly outside. That night, a delivery man dropped off a large cardboard box. The sender, Leo Carter. Inside was a 2-layer chocolate cake he made himself, a little lopsided, but it filled the whole kitchen with that familiar smell. Tucked next to it was a handwritten note. "Happy birthday, my girl. People might forget the day you were born, but I never will. You are the greatest gift I ever received. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. I love you." I read that letter over and over for years. I brought it with me to the dorms and tucked it under my pillow. I kept it in my leather wallet during my first internship in Chicago. It was the only map I had when my sense of self-worth was worn thin by years of comparisons, dismissal, and being forgotten. In a world that always praised Claire like she was the symbol of success, Grandpa was the only one who saw me as something already whole, not needing to prove, not needing to compete. I often wonder what he would have said that Christmas night, the one when I realized I'd been excluded from the family trip, even after transferring all of my savings to help pay for it. He probably wouldn't have said much. Just made Coco sat across from me and asked, "So what's your next move?" Because he knew I always had an answer, if someone just cared enough to ask. I was in my final year of college, interning at an accounting firm in Denver when I got the call from my mom. "Natalia, Grandpa passed away this morning." Her voice was raspy and flat, like she was reading a headline instead of delivering the news that the one person who'd ever truly loved me was gone. I don't remember what I said in response. I just remember staring at the floor, everything around me blurring into a hum. He was gone. It didn't feel like losing a relative. It felt like someone had quietly pulled away the last plank of the bridge I'd been holding onto to survive. I returned to my hometown after 3 years. My parents' house was the same, but colder, more foreign. At the funeral, Claire stood next to her husband, Brandon, in a sleek black dress, perfectly made up, her eyes dry. I clutched my white bouquet, staring at Grandpa's picture in front of the casket. That familiar, gentle smile, but he wasn't waiting for me on the porch anymore. After the service, Grandpa's lawyer, Pauline, invited the family to her office for the reading of the will. A small room, dark wood interior, and the scent of herbal tea and old paper. She adjusted her glasses and carefully turned the pages. "Per the wishes of Mr. Leo Carter," she said evenly, "the will was written 5 years ago with an addendum added 6 months ago. I will now read it aloud." The air in the room stretched taut like a violin string. "To my daughter, Sarah Carter, the 1969 Chevrolet Impala I've cherished my whole life. To my son-in-law, Jonathan Carter, my vintage fishing gear and hiking staff." Mom clasped Dad's hand, nodding softly. Dad pressed his lips together without a word. "To my granddaughter Claire, the sum of $250,000 to continue growing her business and personal future." Claire smiled. Brandon squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered, as if everything was unfolding just as she expected. I didn't react. I didn't expect to be on the list. Maybe some old books or the chess set he promised. I'd learned not to expect anything. But Miss Pauline continued. "And to my granddaughter Natalia Carter, the lakeside house, including all its contents and surrounding property, along with $10,000 for maintenance expenses." The room went quiet for a beat. I looked up at Miss Pauline. She gave a small nod, confirming I'd heard correctly. Claire let out a sharp laugh like glass cracking. "A rundown house and a few grand. Figures, it's perfect for her." I didn't respond. "Wait a second," Brandon interjected, frowning. "Only Natalia inherits the lake house?" Pauline gave a soft cough, then slowly read the additional clause. "As per the addendum dated June 3rd, no one is permitted to live in the lake house except for Natalia Carter, or someone directly designated by Natalia in a legal written document. Under all circumstances, ownership and usage rights belong solely to Natalia." At that, Claire stopped smiling. She shifted in her seat, looking at me like she was reassessing an item that had suddenly gained value. "So she gets exclusive rights to the house," Claire said quietly, then turned toward our parents, waiting for some kind of objection. But Dad remained silent and Mom just furrowed her brow. I sat frozen. In my head, I could hear those afternoons watching Casablanca with Grandpa, the way he held my hand as we walked the lakeshore, his voice gentle. "Someday this place will be yours. A space no one can take from you. A real home." I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel smug. Just a quiet, aching heaviness in my chest. Claire stood, gathering her purse. "Fine," she said, waving a hand. "Congrats, I guess. Now you've got yourself a fixer-upper, a stack of property taxes, and 100 little things to take care of. Hope you know how to keep that roof from caving in." Then she tugged Brandon along behind her, not looking back. My parents followed wordlessly. Mom offered a single sentence without meeting my eyes. "You should be grateful to your grandfather. At least, he thought of you." I stayed a while longer. When the room had emptied and it was just me and Pauline, she poured me a cup of hot tea. "Your grandfather loved you very much," she said. "He once told me, in a family always looking toward the spotlight, he wanted to reserve his light for the one grandchild most often overlooked." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, lifting the teacup to my lips, letting the warmth seep into my trembling chest. And right at that moment I realized, Grandpa hadn't just left me a house. He left me a choice. A way out. A chance to own my life, without asking anyone's permission. 1 year after inheriting the lake house, I started visiting it more regularly on weekends. Mostly to clean, repair some rotted spots, keep it from falling apart. Even with work piling up, every time I stepped into that space I felt my chest loosen a little. The framed photos Grandpa had hung in the hallway, the chipped old teapot, the knitted blanket folded neatly on the armchair. All of it made me feel like he was still there, somehow watching over everything quietly. That November, my mom called me late one evening. She opened with the usual, "How are you?" Then moved quickly to the real reason, using that familiar, polished tone of faux concern. "Claire and Brandon, they're struggling." I stayed silent. She went on to say the restaurant they had opened hadn't drawn in the crowds they hoped. Revenue was down. City rent was too high. They're really exhausted. And you're not even living in that house. I already knew what she was about to ask. But I let her finish. "Maybe you could let your sister stay there for a few months? Just until winter passes. Not paying rent would really help them get through this rough patch." I took a deep breath, staring out the window. The sky was pitch black, streetlights casting blurry halos on the glass. "Just temporary, Mom," I said slowly. 3 months. They can't change anything in the house. They can't touch Grandpa's things. I want to make that clear." She sounded a bit surprised that I set terms, but agreed right away. "Of course. Claire understands." Brandon moved in 3 days later. Claire said she'd come over later in the week. I didn't show up for their move-in, but I left a handwritten letter on the dining table. A clear reminder of the 3-month timeline and a firm request to preserve the home exactly as it was. I thought that would be enough. But I underestimated their sense of entitlement. 2 months later, around mid-December, I returned to the lake house unannounced to check on the heating system. Snow had begun to pile up and I worried the pipes might freeze. The moment I opened the door, coat still on, I stopped cold. Grandpa's old brown leather couch, the one he always said was just worn in enough to be perfect for leaning back, was gone, replaced with a modern glossy gray set that looked like it belonged in a showroom. The oil painting he had made in 1963, Autumn Woods by the Lake, had been taken off the wall, replaced by an oversized wedding photo of Claire and Brandon, all beaming faces and overexposed lighting. I walked the hallway, touching the spot where Grandpa's portrait used to hang. Only a faint outline and dusty hook remained. The kitchen had changed too. His ceramic teacups were nowhere to be seen, replaced with crystal wine glasses. I opened the cupboards. Everything sparkled, everything was spotless. But none of it felt like his. I stepped into the master bedroom. The old knit blanket was gone, the bed wrapped in new cream-colored linens. Sleek, cold. On the nightstand were Claire's perfume bottle and Brandon's wristwatch. This room used to be where Grandpa read, where I'd fallen asleep on stormy nights as a child. Now it looked like a sterile hotel suite, emptied of every trace of memory. I returned to the living room and stood there, unmoving. The house still smelled faintly of cinnamon, Claire's favorite holiday scent spray. On the coffee table, a party invitation rested at an angle. "A cozy Christmas at Lakeview Cottage. Claire, Brandon cordially invite you." I picked it up. The date, tomorrow night. The guest list included my parents, Claire's friends, and a few restaurant staff. Not me. I set the invitation back down and took one last look around the room. Everything looked familiar but wrong, like a counterfeit version of the home Grandpa had built with love. The door creaked open behind me. Claire stepped in with a grocery bag in her arms. She froze, then smiled, her surprise clearly rehearsed. "Oh, you're here. Why didn't you call ahead?" she asked lightly, like I was just a neighbor who'd popped by. "I'm checking the heating system," I said, my eyes locked on the wedding photo. Claire placed the bag on the kitchen counter and sighed. "Brandon and I just updated a few things to match the space better. Hope you don't mind." I turned to face her. 3-month verbal contract. No changing furniture. No removing Grandpa's pictures. She gave a thin smile. "Natalia, don't be so rigid. This house needed a fresh vibe." "This house isn't a showroom," I said calmly. "It's memory. It's the last place left where Grandpa still feels real." Claire shrugged, brushing past me to open the fridge. "Anyway, we're having a little party tomorrow night. Mom and Dad are coming. You're welcome to stop by. But I figure you're probably busy." I didn't reply. I looked around one final time, Every corner, every crack in the ceiling still there, but the spirit of this home was being suffocated. Then I walked out without saying another word. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad the way I used to. There was only an aching emptiness, as if the house had turned into a stranger, just like my family. I haven't returned to the lake house since that afternoon when I saw Claire's wedding photo replace Grandpa's portrait. I needed space, not to react with fury but to respond with clarity. Every sense of connection I had to that place felt like it was being scrubbed away piece by the very people I once called my own. But less than 2 weeks later, Claire called. And her voice sounded strangely gentle. "Natalia," Claire said, her voice hesitant, "I think we've misunderstood each other for too long." She paused, then added, "Brandon and I are planning a Christmas vacation in Aspen. Family trip. Mom and Dad are going too. I genuinely want you to come with us." I stayed quiet for a moment. Claire kept talking as if trying to beat me to the refusal. "It's beautiful there. White snow, natural hot springs, log cabins nestled against the mountains. A real vacation. And I want you to be part of it." I wasn't naive enough to believe in her sudden change of heart, but deep down, I still hadn't fully learned how to live with being left out. A part of me still longed to be included in something simple. A family vacation where I wasn't left on the sidelines. "How much does it cost?" I asked. "About $2,800. Just transfer it to me and I'll take care of the tickets, the cabin, everything." It took me a full week to gather that money. I had to cut my monthly savings, turn down the year-end dinner with my coworkers, and even cancel buying the winter coat I'd been eyeing all season. I scraped together every dollar like I was buying my way into a family role. And I told myself that if this vacation went well, maybe, just maybe, things would start to change. The day I transferred the money, Claire texted me right away. "I knew you wouldn't let me down. Aspen, here we come." A bit of the weight lifted from my chest. The feeling of being invited as a real family member, even if only temporarily, gave me hope. I even picked out a new suitcase, pre-ordered the cheapest ski outfit I could find, and bought a little mini Christmas tree to bring along. I imagined the whole family sitting by the fireplace, logs crackling, laughter echoing through the winter air. Then came the evening of December 22nd. I was folding clothes and booking my ride to the airport when an email from Claire popped up. The subject line was short, "About the trip." I clicked it open. "Natalia, I'm sorry but there's been a sudden change. Since the budget ran over with the upgraded cabin, we all agreed to hold off on your spot for now. Could you stay behind and house sit for us? Really appreciate it. I'll send you pictures." I reread it twice, still holding the wool scarf mid-fold. The budget ran over. We all agreed. Stay behind and house sit. No one asked me. No promise of a refund. And the cruelest part, "I'll send you pictures." I called Claire. No answer. Called Mom. She picked up after a few rings, her voice light, as if me being dropped from the vacation was perfectly reasonable. "Don't make a fuss. Claire and Brandon really tried to make it work. Besides, you're nearby. House sitting makes the most sense." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "that's my house. Not theirs." She paused for a few seconds, then sighed. "But Claire is your sister and family helps each other in tough times. I think you understand that." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every word forming in my head felt too heavy to say out loud. I opened my bank app. The $2,800 transaction was right there. No note about a refund, no promise to pay me back. I opened Instagram. Claire had just posted, "We made it to Aspen. The snow is breathtaking. So grateful to have everyone here." Below was a photo of her standing in a snowy landscape, beaming, her arms wrapped around Brandon, with a luxurious wooden cabin in the background. I scrolled further. Pictures of my parents smiling near a hot spring, a packed dinner table, sparkling Christmas lights. Not a single mention of me. No one asked if I was okay. After they used the money I scraped together to enjoy a holiday I was only invited to through empty words. I shut my phone off and sat alone in my tiny apartment, suitcase still open. Next to it was a box of chocolates I had planned to gift everyone. I had never seen things so clearly. Being excluded wasn't just accidental. It was calculated. They needed me only when I was useful. When I agreed to stay out of the frame. When I kept quiet so others could smile. But I wasn't that 16-year-old girl anymore, waiting for a birthday cake to arrive in the mail. I was growing up and I felt there was no more room for anyone who tried to take my voice away. I stood up, folded the scarf neatly and placed it in the drawer. Quietly but not weakly. Something inside me had started to shift. Not loudly, but undeniably. I didn't reply to the cancellation email. I didn't call. I didn't complain. The next morning I sent Claire a short message. Wishing you and everyone a great trip. I'll make sure the house is taken care of. No one replied. That same afternoon I stopped by the lake house. Snow blanketed the front steps, but fresh tire tracks showed they'd only just left. The house was silent, door not fully locked. I stepped inside. The living room still had a few empty wine bottles and a red tablecloth from their Christmas party. The cinnamon scent lingered. On the coffee table sat their wedding photo, front and center like a declaration of ownership. I didn't touch anything right away. I just stood there in the dim winter light, took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. First call was to my lawyer, Amelia, the one I knew from a freelance accounting gig. I kept it brief. I want to file for unlawful occupancy, breach of will terms, and unauthorized use of inherited property. She answered firmly, send me photos of the house, inventory of items, and a copy of your grandfather's will. I'll take care of the rest. Next call was to a moving service. They had one slot available early the next morning. Holiday premium rates apply, the coordinator warned. I agreed instantly. Last call was to a local locksmith, Mr. Sam, an older man known for being meticulous. I need all locks replaced, main door and side windows. It's urgent. He paused a moment. Claire causing you trouble again? I didn't answer. He sighed. I'll be there at 8 tomorrow morning. That night, I slept in Grandpa's room on the same old bed where we used to watch black and white movies and eat cookies, where he'd talk about things no one else ever bothered to ask me. I pulled the wool blanket up to my chin. My heart wasn't at peace, but my mind was clear. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, just wind and the creaking of dry wood. The movers arrived on time. I walked them through each room, pointing out Claire and Brandon's belongings. Leather suitcases, espresso machine, coat rack, fancy stainless steel cookware, even the Christmas decorations from last week. I photographed, labeled, and sealed every single item. This is the garage, I told them. Stack everything in there. No need to organize. Just leave it as is. After they left, Mr. Sam showed up. White-bearded, tool bag in hand. He replaced each lock carefully. As he tightened the final screw, he looked over and asked, Natalia, are you sure? I nodded. I've been sure since the day they used my money for their vacation. He didn't say anything more, just nodded back. All done. You're the only one with the keys now. After lunch, I made myself a cup of peppermint tea and opened my laptop. I went to the most trusted home rental site in the region and created a listing. Cozy lakefront home, peaceful, fully furnished, rich with family history. Prefer long-term tenants who are respectful and responsible. I attached the photos I had taken when the house was still just as Grandpa left it. Simple decor, golden sunlight streaming through the windows, the armchair with the folded wool blanket, the oil painting of autumn. Just a few hours later, the listing had dozens of views. I received 3 phone calls and 5 text messages asking for more details. One message stood out. Hello MS. Oh yeah. My name is David. I used to be an aerospace engineer but retired early after an accident. I'm looking for a quiet place to recover and finish a manuscript I'm writing. I don't smoke, I'm not noisy. If the house is still available, I'd be happy to come see it right after Christmas. I read the message again and again. There was no pleading, no demands, no talk of price. Just simple, polite sincerity. I replied, Hello Mr. David, I'd be happy to meet you. Morning of December 27th, if that works for you. He texted back, See you at 9 a.m. Thank you for trusting me. I closed my phone and leaned back in the chair. Through the window, the snow was falling thicker. Everything in the house had returned to silence. No more wedding photos. No more cinnamon candles. Just old memories and an empty space that had finally been given back. And in that space, I was no longer the quiet younger sister, the one who endured in silence, always standing behind someone else. I had started to step forward, not loudly, not hurriedly, but by quietly restoring order, by taking decisive and silent action. I woke up the morning of December 27th to soft sunlight filtering through the curtains. The snow in the yard hadn't fully melted, but the air felt calmer. At exactly 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. David, a man in his 60s, tall frame, eyes that were bright but weary, stood on the porch wearing a gray knit hat and a gentle smile. The conversation was unexpectedly easy and genuine. He walked through each room, asked about the heating system, the house's history, then softly said, "This place seems like it was once deeply loved." I smiled and said simply, "It was my grandfather's." When David left, promising to return in 3 days to sign the lease, I felt more at peace than I had in months. But that peace lasted less than 10 hours. That evening, while I was reviewing accounting files, my phone began to buzz. The first call came from Mom. Before I could answer, 2 more calls came in. Then a flood of texts, relentless like a storm. "Claire, Natalia, what kind of sick joke is this? I came home to find the locks changed. Did you really do this? Claire," another message, "my stuff was thrown into the garage like trash. Do you even know what was in there? Restaurant documents, personal files. Are you insane? Brandon, do you understand this could lead to a lawsuit? This is an invasion of privacy and intentional destruction of property." I didn't respond. The phone kept vibrating. Then messages from Mom began arriving. "Mom, Natalia, what are you doing? How could you treat your sister this way? You're tearing this family apart. Mom, Claire's been crying since she got home. Your father was so furious he skipped dinner. Do you understand what your actions are doing to this family? Mom," another message, "your grandfather would be heartbroken if he saw this." I looked up at the photo of my grandfather on my desk, the only one I had brought back from the lake house. A worn wooden frame, him sitting by the water, fishing, smiling gently. I didn't say anything. I just pulled my laptop closer and opened the legacy folder. I sent an email attaching 3 files. A scanned copy of the will with certified stamps, clearly stating, "No one is permitted to reside in this house except Natalia Carter or an individual of her choosing." The official lease agreement between David and me, legally signed. Photos of Claire and Brandon's belongings, carefully packed and labeled, with a signed receipt from the moving service. The email subject line was only 2 words: notification. Within 10 minutes, my phone blew up with even more furious replies. "Claire, so you're really kicking me out? No warning, no conversation. You're cruel. Claire, all because you're jealous. You've always been jealous that I was loved more. Happy now. Mom, what did this get you? An empty house? A stranger as a tenant instead of your own family?" I still didn't reply. The phone kept ringing. I put it on silent. The next morning, I opened Instagram out of habit. Claire had posted a photo of the house, a shot from the outside with the caption, "When your own blood turns against you over a few walls and an outdated will." Tragic. Most of the comments were from her friends, names I recognized from the wedding, people who once called me the quiet little sister. They casually typed, "Wow. Who needs enemies with family like that? You're still too kind, Claire. If it were me, that girl wouldn't have gotten off easy." I wasn't hurt. I just saw more clearly than ever that their anger wasn't about losing a house. It was about losing control. I was trimming cedar branches on the front porch when my phone vibrated for the 25th time that day. It was Mom again. I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking I'd let it ring like all the others. But then I answered. Not because I wanted to explain, because I was ready to speak. Her voice came immediately, sharp and cold like steel. "You did this out of revenge, didn't you, Natalia?" I wasn't surprised. "No, are you okay? No, I want to understand." Just a sentence that accused me. I took a breath, still holding the cedar branch, and spoke slowly. "No, Mom. This wasn't revenge. I did it to save myself." There was a pause on the other end, then she raised her voice as if she hadn't heard my answer. "Our family might have made mistakes, but what you did was heartless. You threw your sister out while she's struggling. She's exhausted, and how could you?" I sat down on the steps, looking out at the frozen lake in the distance. The water was half-iced, reflecting the glow of the winter sky. And I said without retreating, "Do you know how many times in my life I've been the backup option? The last pick, the one left standing on the sidelines." Mom didn't respond. Only the sound of the wind came through the phone. When I got the statewide scholarship, you didn't say a word. But when Claire landed a short internship at a small restaurant, you threw a celebration. When I graduated from college, you missed the ceremony because you were out house hunting with Claire and Brandon. And when Grandpa passed and left me this house, you called it an old burden. That's because, she stammered, but I didn't let her finish. I don't need excuses. I need you to listen. Just once. I tightened my grip. I was asked to give up my room for her, to cancel my plans for her, to give up even the role of daughter in this family, for her. I've never been at the center of anything. No one ever asked me before using my name to co-sign a loan for Claire. Everything was always about what Claire needs. But has anyone ever asked, how's Natalia doing? Mom's voice grew quiet. Maybe she was starting to realize just how deep the wounds had gone. And now, when this house, the only thing left from Grandpa, something he clearly said should be mine, is taken over like it's just assumed, like I have no right to it at all, and you ask me why? I stood up, still looking out at the lake, clutching the phone tightly to my ear. I'm not gloating. I'm not trying to get revenge. But I need limits. I need boundaries. I need to be treated like a person, not just a utility always expected to sacrifice. There was a long silence on the other end, then Mom spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. Don't you think you're overreacting? After all, you're still family. I let out a soft laugh, not out of joy but exhaustion. Family doesn't mean everyone gets to walk in, rearrange the furniture, erase the memories, and claim everything that once belonged to me and call it love. This house is no longer a place anyone can just come and go as they please. It's not where Claire gets to throw parties or call it hers whenever she feels like it. I spoke slowly. From now on, this house is mine. And anyone who wants to come in will need to knock. On the other end, I heard a long sigh. I just want peace in the family, she whispered. Peace, I repeated softly. Peace doesn't come from one person endlessly enduring everything. A cold breeze passed through, rustling the small pine tree I had hung on the front porch. The silver bells chimed faintly, their sound delicate but steady. I heard Mom fall silent. Then she hung up without another word. No Happy New Year. No apology. No explanation. But I knew I had just reclaimed something far more important than any of those things. My voice. That winter ended in complete silence from my family. No holiday greetings, no check-in texts, no surprise calls in the middle of the night. Claire and my parents vanished from my life as if I had never existed in theirs. But unlike the years before, that silence didn't make me feel small or abandoned. For the first time, it felt peaceful. David's rent transferred to my account like clockwork every month. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to free me from dependency. Every dollar I spent no longer carried the bitter aftertaste of family debt. I opened a separate savings account, then started researching short-term certificate investments. Not to get rich, just to learn how to take control of my life, starting with the smallest numbers. David, the tenant, turned out to be far more interesting than his quiet demeanor had suggested. Whenever I stopped by to check the heating or change the water filter, he'd invite me to sit down for tea. At first, it was just polite small talk. Then the conversations stretched into hours. David had once worked as a design engineer for an aerospace company in Arizona, but had taken early retirement after a skiing accident left his right leg weakened. One late afternoon, as I was explaining my modest investment plans, he suddenly offered, "Would you like me to take a look at your yield analysis?" I used to manage the technical finance division for over a decade. I was surprised, but I said yes. From that day on, he became my unofficial advisor. No contracts, no titles, just an experienced adult willing to share what he knew with a young woman learning to stand on her own 2 feet. I signed up for a night class in corporate accounting, juggling both work and study. It left me drained, but I felt like I was walking a path of my own. Not to compete, not to please, just to become someone I could respect. One evening after class, I sat outside the campus courtyard, gazing at the star-filled Denver sky, and realized something. I hadn't measured myself against Claire in a long time. She used to be the axis our family revolved around, but not anymore. I heard through an old friend that her restaurant had finally shut down after prolonged losses, that she and Brandon had split after constant fights over money. They had moved back in with my parents, trying to regain stability, as Mom used to say. As for me, I kept living in my small rented apartment in a quiet neighborhood, opening the window each morning to let in the sunlight, making my own coffee with a second-hand machine I'd bought during a sale. On some weekends, I'd return to the lakeside house to check the plumbing, bringing David some cookies or books. He always greeted me with a warm cup of tea and simple but thoughtful questions like, "How's work lately? Are you sleeping enough? Have you felt proud of yourself?" No one in my family had ever asked me those things. And it was through this stranger that I learned something essential. Sometimes real family doesn't come from blood, but from unconditional care. One early spring afternoon, I stood in the backyard of the house where Grandpa once taught me to plant carrots when I was 10. I saw my shadow stretch across the grass under the sun's gentle rays, and it didn't feel lonely anymore. I realized I'd come a long way, not because someone led me, not because anyone pushed me, but because I no longer wanted to live a life someone else had written for me. No one called me to update me on Claire. My parents didn't text to ask how I was. But I wasn't hurt by that anymore. Their silence was no longer a void to be filled. It was a boundary I had drawn. On this side of the line, I could finally live as an adult, no longer waiting for conditional love from anyone. I returned to the lakeside house on a late winter afternoon, when most of the snow had melted and the lake surface began to catch the soft light of early spring. Not to check on anything. Not for any specific reason. I just felt a quiet pull inside, calling me back to a place that had once been a witness to all I had lost, and all I had reclaimed. The old key was still in the pocket of my coat from last year. As I slid it into the lock, the familiar click echoed like a memory. The wooden door opened, welcoming me with the scent of mint tea and dried pine wood I had known since childhood. David had left that morning to visit his daughter for a few days. I stepped inside, hung up my coat, set my bag down, and stood still in the living room, now tenderly cared for, thoughtfully arranged. There were no more cracks on the ceiling, the hardwood floors had been polished, and fresh white linen curtains hung neatly beside the windows. But what warmed my heart most were the old details that remained untouched. The armchair Grandpa always sat in, the small tea table with that familiar scratch, and his photos still placed in the center of the bookshelf. No one had changed them. No one had disturbed those memories anymore. Everything was preserved, not because I had to fight for it, but because I had finally learned how to protect what belonged to me. I stepped into his old study, the small room to the left of the hallway, where he used to handwrite long letters to old friends or tinker with his fishing rods. On the desk, inside a wooden box beside the lamp, was the letter he had left for me. I had read it once just after David moved in. But today I opened it again. His handwriting was still clear, slightly leaning to the right, the paper yellowed with time. I read slowly, each line sinking into my lightly trembling hands. "Natalia, if you're holding this letter, it means you've chosen yourself. And that's what I always hoped for. I know that ever since you were little, you had to learn how to shrink yourself to fit into a family that had no room for your voice. You lived as if you needed permission just to exist. I saw it. I saw the times you forced a smile when you were left out, the nights you sat alone on the porch steps hoping someone would notice you were there. But Natalia, you weren't born to be someone else's backdrop. You are light, not loud but steady. This house, I left it to you not because it's big or beautiful, but because I believe it will be your anchor in this world. A roof. A beginning. When you're ready, live your life without asking for anyone's permission. And if that day comes and you still remember me, know this: I am always behind you, even if you've turned your back on the whole world." I folded the letter, no longer hiding it away. I placed it on the nightstand between two notebooks and his old fountain pen. My hand gently touched the wooden desk, still the same coarse oak he built himself, never willing to replace it with anything more modern, like Mom once suggested. I sat in his old swivel chair looking around the room. The space was quiet, the only sound was the soft breeze nudging the porch door. On the ceiling, his photo was still there, the one I rehung after Claire had taken it down, carefully cleaned and returned to its rightful place. I looked into his eyes in the photo, the gaze that never demanded I be better, prettier, or more self-sacrificing to be loved. Just a gaze full of quiet belief, enough for a child to grow up without feeling wrong for simply being herself. I smiled, not a smile to prove anything, not one meant to be seen. Just a small, genuine smile. I don't need their forgiveness. I don't need them to call back. I don't need an awkward family dinner or half-hearted apologies. I need the freedom to live as myself. And I have it now. No one gave it to me. I stepped into it, One refusal at a time, one moment of holding firm to what was mine, one moment of speaking up even when I was the only one who heard. And here, in this quiet wooden house by the lake, I finally get to be fully, completely myself, without needing anyone's permission. What would you have done if you were me in this story? If the only place that still held traces of the one person who truly loved you was invaded? If your voice had always been drowned out by the silence of those who were supposed to protect you, would you have had the courage to rise and choose yourself? I believe we each have our limits. Some endure until they're numb, some quietly fall apart, and some, like me, choose a day to step out from the shadow of sacrifice and live the life they deserve. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below. I'd love to know, what have you had to reclaim for yourself? What words did you finally speak after years of silence? And if you want to hear more honest stories about family, the pain, the breaking points, but also the strength and healing, hit follow. The things that were never spoken out loud might just mirror the things you've been quietly carrying too.